Hi Year 3, so Wednesday afternoon and it's time for some science. Last week we looked at our new topic, we introduced our new topic of light to you, and we considered last week some of the light sources that we have around us, and we looked at sorting different objects into those objects that actually created light and gave us light. So it might have been things like candles or light bulbs that you can see behind me here, the sun, lots of different objects that give us light. And then we talked about those objects which don't give us light. And there might have been some in there that caused a little bit of confusion. We maybe talked about the moon and the fact that although we can see the moon at night, that actually it's not the moon that's creating the light. It's the light from the sun that's reflecting onto the moon that we actually see. So it's not really a light source. So we talked about that last week. We also talked about the fact that when we're thinking about dark, what we mean by the word dark, then we're thinking about that being the absence of light. So that's when we have no light. At the moment, in my background, it's a lot. I've got the lights on, I've got some light coming through the window, even though it's a cloudy day, there's still some light coming in through the window. So there's lots of light around. So that means that I'm not in a dark room. I've got lots of light sources around me. But dark is that absence of light. Okay, that's what we mean by dark, when there are no light sources there to enable us to have the light around us. So today we're going to move on a little bit and we're going to look at how those light sources actually enable us to see different objects. Okay, so we're going to have a look at a PowerPoint together, as we always do, because that just helps to guide us through our main points for our lesson, okay, today. So there's a couple of little videos here as well that we're going to be looking at. And again, as always, if you want to, you can come back and have a look at these videos on your own. I know sometimes the sound quality isn't great when we do it this way over there. So if the sound is not great, then you can go back and you can have a little look at it on your own and just see the main points. So science, reflective surfaces. We talk about this word reflection quite a lot. We're going to try and explore it a little bit more today and actually find out a little bit more about what we mean by it. So I understand which surfaces reflect light. That's our aim for today. So we're going to be thinking about what we actually mean by that word reflect, and also which surfaces allow that to happen the best. So we should, by the end of the lesson, be able to explain what reflection is, identify reflective materials, so we know which ones are going to help us in the best way, and how they can keep us safe. You already might have a few ideas about that already. Okay, so we'll go through and we'll see if your ideas are correct. So it says, click the light bulb to watch this, the use of reflective materials for safety short film. So it's all about materials that reflect light. There's some questions for you to think about as we are watching the video. So before I go straight to the video, let's have a look at the little questions that we need to be thinking as we're watching. So what does it look like if a material reflects light well? Okay, so what does it look like if a material reflects light well? Which colours do you think reflect most light? And then what are reflective materials useful for? So just some 3 questions just to be thinking about. Now we'll come back to those after the video, so don't worry too much, but just bear them in mind as we are watching it. Okay, now I'm going to come out of the PowerPoint for now, because sometimes it's better to watch it in a slightly different way and not through the PowerPoint. So this is the video in question that we're going to be looking at, and probably got an idea already about what the theme of this video is going to be about from the little picture we can see there. So let's have a little watch and see. Hold on a second now. I'm just going to come back out of that, and before I start watching it, there we go. So
If you're going to be out in the dark, it's a really good idea to wear clothes that reflect light well, so you can be seen easily. Different colours reflect different amounts of light, and the material a piece of clothing is made from may affect how light is reflected. The yellow jacket seems much brighter than the dark red one. You can see it more clearly because it reflects more light. But some materials can behave surprisingly. This grey jacket doesn't seem to reflect very much light. Even with the headlamp shining, it doesn't look very bright seen from this angle. But seen from a driver's point of view, the bands show up really well. That's because these bands are made out of a special material which reflects light in a particular way. Light from the headlights is scattered in all directions by the yellow jacket. But when the light from the headlamps reflects off the bands, it all reflects back down the same path, straight to the driver's eyes. Because more reflected light reaches the driver's eyes, it looks much brighter. The material the bands are made from is called retroreflective. The light from the car headlamps falls on a road sign, but from the roadside the effect isn't very special. But look at the view from inside the car. The signs look really bright. Nearly all the light from the car headlamps is reflected back off the sign to the driver's eyes. That's because the signs are made from retroreflective material too. But even the best reflective gear doesn't work if there's no light source at all.
Okay, so let's just come out of that film a moment. So we could see there that the role that this idea of reflective materials play in safety, because we saw a scene there at night where the driver was driving along, and we could see in the headlights what they were able to see, which is obviously really important for keeping us all safe. If we are out walking or on a bike at night, we need to make sure we're being seen. And they talked in the video there about different colours of clothes. So we saw the lady there that had the dark red coat standing with the lady that had the bright yellow coat. And you could see that the bright yellow coat was more visible than the dark red coat, because it was able to reflect more light off the surface of that material. But then when the gentleman came out of his the car and they swapped places, you could see them, even with his grey coat, because he had what they called the retroreflective strips on there, that those retroreflective strips bounced the light directly back at the lady that was sat in the car. So that was even easier for her to see than the lady that was wearing the yellow coat. So the yellow coat was reflecting the light in different directions. It was bouncing off in different ways. But because the retroreflective bounced it straight back at the person and the direction where that light source is coming from, then the person in the car is able to see it. And we saw the same with the road signs as well. So those retroreflective strips are a really useful way of keeping us safe, because they reflect the light straight back at the direction where that light source is coming from. So let's just pick back up on our PowerPoint where we got to before. Okay, so we had those questions to think about as we were going through our video there. Let me just get this back. There we go. So those are our questions. So what does it look like if the material reflects well? So which colours do you think reflect most light? So we talked about those different colours there. And what are reflective materials useful for? Well, definitely for keeping us safe. So light travels in a straight line. We could see that, how that light was reflected off those different materials there. It travels back in a straight line. So when light hits an object, it is reflected and bounces off. If the reflective light hits our eyes, we can see the object. So we can see on this diagram here, we've got the torch, which is shining onto the object, and we can see where the light is coming down onto the object, and then it's bouncing back off again and into somebody's eyes there, so they can see that material. Okay, but that's what we mean by this idea of this reflective light. That's how we see things. It shines onto an object and it bounces back into our eyes. Okay, so the light from the torch hits the object. We can see those lines coming down there and then coming back, and the light is reflected from the object. Some surfaces and materials reflect light well. Other materials do not reflect light well. So reflective surfaces and materials can be very useful. Reflective strips on coats or bags mean you can be seen at night. They are also useful for firefighters or builders who may work in a dark and dangerous environment. So I know on your book bags that you very often have a strip of that retroreflective material that was talked about before. So, and the same on your coats as well. There might be strips on certain parts of your coats. If you're out walking your dog at night, you might have a collar or a lead that's got some of those retroreflective materials on them. Okay, so everyday things that we use all the time have those reflective materials on them, which mean that it keeps us safe. And equally, as it says there, for certain jobs, then they also need to be wearing those sorts of materials to keep them safe as well. So firefighters, builders, road workmen who are out on the motorways at night fixing things, okay, repairing roads, they also need to be wearing materials like that to be able to see. Cat's eyes help drivers see the road by reflecting light from headlamps. So the cat's eyes are the markings in the middle of the road, and very often if you're driving along the road at night, to help you see where the middle of the road is, you'll see that your headlights will reflect off the cat's eyes to show you and guide you the way that you are traveling. Mirrors let us see ourselves and are also useful in cars to allow drivers to see behind them. So you'll notice that there's a mirror up on the windscreen that allows your driver to see behind them, and there's also the wing mirrors at the side of the car as well, so the driver can see what's going on behind them and allow them to keep safe as they're driving. Retroreflectors are used for road signs so that drivers can see the signs from their car, and that's what we saw in that video there. And you might think of some other uses where you've seen those retroreflective strips being used. Okay, so what we are going to do today is to use that information that we have found and the information that we have been talking about to design a poster which is aimed really for the children in lower school, so for children in year 1 and year 2, to just remind them of how they need to be keeping safe when they are out in the dark. And thankfully at the moment the nights are starting to get a bit lighter now. It's sort of about 6 o'clock or so before it gets too dark, but you know, in the dark months of December and January, when it gets dark really early, you can be out and about in the dark quite often. And so when we are out in the dark, it's important that we are keeping safe and we're doing things, all right, to allow us to make sure that people who are in cars, who are driving, can see us nice and clearly. So we today are going to design a poster which is going to allow us to share this information with the lower school children so they know what they need to be doing. So let me click onto your task here for today. So now it's your task is to design an information poster for lower school children to explain how to keep safe when they are out in the dark. So things that we need to include on our success criteria. So we need to have a clear heading for your poster. That could go at the top of the page, it could go in the middle somewhere, but it needs to be a nice, clear heading to tell us what your poster is about. Okay, so keeping safe in the dark, or how can we keep safe? Question mark. You could ask a question as a heading. So, but it needs to have a heading so we know what your poster is about. An explanation of what we mean by reflective. So we've talked about that word quite a lot, but we need to explain what we mean by that. So you might want to draw a little diagram to show what we mean by reflective. You might want to go back to that picture that we saw of the torch shining and the light reflecting off that object there. So you might want to think about that little diagram just as a way of explaining what we mean by reflective. So examples of what allows a material to reflect things well. So we've talked about the different colours. We've talked about these retroreflective strips that are used to allow us to see things even better when there's a light source that's shining on that material there. So again, that might be another diagram that you could draw to show the way that the light bounces straight back at the person with the retroreflective materials, as opposed to like the coat we saw, for example, where the light bounced in different directions. We see it better when it comes straight back to our eyes. So you could show on your poster what young children should wear or have to keep them safe when they are out in the dark. So, we've talked about the coats that have the retroreflective strips. We've talked about the bags that they have. We've talked about if they're on a bike, sometimes you can have those retroreflective strips on the bikes as well, on the wheels or the handlebars, just so they show up. And obviously they need to have lights on their bikes as well. So try and think of the types of things that the young children in lower school can do to make sure that they are keeping safe, and try and include as many sciencey words in there as you can. Okay, so because remember, this is a science poster as well as an information poster, so try and explain the science behind things as well. Now, that is your task for today. Before I leave you though for today, with your task, I want to show you one more video clip because I quite like this one. It also explains about the idea of reflective materials, but it's done in quite a funny little way, which I quite like. Some of you might be familiar with a nursery rhyme called Wee Willie Winkie. And Wee Willie Winkie was a character that ran around the streets at night, just making sure that everybody was asleep at night. And nice and safe. And obviously, because he was out and about at night, that meant that, he had to be careful really on how he was moving about, because it's very dark, there's no light. So it was very dark where he was. So this little video clip just sort of explains to us the problems that he had and some of the issues that he came across when he was walking around the streets at night, and it might be useful for some of your information poster that you've got as well, if you see it from Wee Willie Winkie's point of view. So let me find for you the video that I would like for you to watch, just as a little bit of an extra. So let me come out of that one because we finished watching that one there, but I would like you to see this one here, so we can see it's a cartoon image. So,
Winkie's the name. Wee Willie. I've been running through the streets for years. Upstairs and downstairs in my nightgown, checking everyone was safely tucked up in bed. Everyone in bed?
Yes, Willie.
It had never been a problem before, but tonight, something was different. I set off through the streets as usual. It seemed a perfectly ordinary night. As I turned the corner from Main Street into an unlit alley, the world went black. I lay there in the darkness, wondering what had gone wrong. Was it something I'd done earlier? That afternoon, I decided to do something different. I was bored with the same old nightgown and candle. That outfit was getting stale. No one noticed me anymore. I just merged into the night. I needed to make my mark, and what better than some new gear? Little did I know what disaster lay in store. I decided to compare some outfits, but nothing seemed to be right. The lamps and the torches were heavy and clumsy, the clothes drab and boring. I needed to see in the dark, and as I stood there looking, it came to me. The bright yellow jacket with reflective strips. Of course, it stood out. I looked outside. It was getting dark. There was no time to lose. I quickly threw on the jacket. I glanced at the candle. I didn't need it now. It was history. I stepped outside. I set off through the streets as usual. It seemed a perfectly ordinary night. As I turned the corner from Main Street into an unlit alley, the world went black. I lay there in the darkness, wondering what had gone wrong. Was it something I'd done earlier?
Okay, so let me just come out of that for a moment. So I wonder if you noticed what he did wrong. What mistake did he make as he was going through the streets at night? So he started off when he was the old wee Willy Winky, running around with a candle, but with a light source. In his room in the afternoon, when he was trying to have that change of outfit, he wanted something different to make him stand out. He was looking around trying all sorts of very crazy and interesting types of clothes on. But the one thing that he stood out for him was the high-vis jacket that was on his bed. Some of you might wear some of those from time to time if you're out and about. And in that room, with all the light that was in that room, the light reflected really well off that retroreflective material for him to be able to see it nice and clearly. And he thought, that's a perfect answer. I can wear that. I'm going to put that on at night, and I'm going to go off into the streets at night, and I'm going to make sure that everyone's nice and safe. What he didn't take with him was actually a light source, was his candle or a torch or a lamp, and he had some fantastic ones there. So when he went into that dark alleyway where there was no light source there, then there was nothing to be reflected off that jacket. So it didn't work. He wasn't able to be seen, and he wasn't able to see where he was going. So the light source is something that generates light. The retroreflective material will reflect light, but it won't give us light. And that was the mistake that he made. So they are very good, but they're very good when there is light there to be able to reflect. So a little bit of a fun video just to get you thinking about the idea of light sources and reflection. So I'm going to leave you now to have a go at doing your poster and trying to see what information you can share with Lowe's School about how to keep safe in the dark evenings. Have fun designing. I know you'll come up with some amazing ideas and some really creative ideas, because you are really good at doing that. And if you'd like to, as always, please send them to us and we can see what you have done. So enjoy, and I will catch up with you soon. Take care. Bye.